What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. All right, let's get into Houston, Cleveland. I did a long film thread on this one on Twitter. It was like 30, 40 clips. So if you're looking for visual representations of some of the things that I'm breaking down today, just go over to our Twitter feed, my Twitter feed, @_JasonLT, where I just have all the clips from the game in a thread so you guys can see some of those visual representations. The story of this game in the early portion had to do with the perimeter defense battle. I talk about this battle a lot in the NBA. It reminds me of line play in the NFL. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan because my entire extended family is from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we go out there for Thanksgiving every year. It's been kind of like a family tradition. And rooting for the Cowboys my entire life, you know, I have these like different phases, right? And I remember like in the mid-2010s, we had this huge, massive front line with a bunch of, Hall of Famers on it, guys like Zach Martin and Tyron Smith, right? And they would just shove everybody around. And wherever we went, didn't matter if it was on the road, at home, we could just run over everybody because we had, DeMarco Murray or Ezekiel Elliott and just a stacked offensive line that we could run all over everybody. And whenever Dak needed to throw, he just had all the time in the world because we could protect for him, right? And it just makes everything easier when you can block at the with your offensive line in the NFL. And in the NBA, there's a similar kind of push and pull because it can go the opposite way, right? Like if your line doesn't block well and you can't establish the run, suddenly you have to lean on the passing game even more. And when you can't protect your quarterback, he's running for his life and nobody has any time to get open. And it's just kind of like this simple push and pull that happens every single snap, right in the middle of the screen, right in front of you. It's almost the easiest thing to kind of like watch in a game to see where you can almost just see a push when the offensive line's winning or a push the opposite way when the defensive line's winning. And in the NBA, there's a very similar battle that happens there at the point of attack. Whether it's a ball screen or an ISO or a post up, if it's an ISO and the guy can just cleanly dust him off the dribble and get downhill, that's going to be a problem. If it's a ball screen and he can cleanly get over the top of the screen and get racing downhill, that's a problem. If it's a post up and he's just going through that guy and getting wherever he wants, that's a problem. But if on an ISO you flatten out those drives and force more side-to-side movement, if on those ball screens you stay attached over the top and prevent him from really getting ahead of steam going downhill, or in the post-ups, if you can wall up a little bit and prevent him from really getting deep position in the paint, those things make it easier for your defense. On a simple level, if someone's screaming downhill with the basketball, everyone's going to help instinctually, and that's going to open up spray out opportunities. Or if people don't help in time, that guy's going to score, right? And when you do flatten those drives out, when you do flatten those post-ups out, when you do flatten those ball screens out, all of a sudden people have more ability to stay home off the ball, which prevents you from getting into rotation. It is a simple push and pull in basketball games that determines a lot of what happens on any given possession. And Houston has a couple of wins here against Cleveland. And some of this with Cleveland too, I want to emphasize this before we get into it. This is a really tough matchup for Cleveland. Houston is just so much bigger and more athletic on the perimeter. And then to make matters worse, even though Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are both excellent defensive players, Sengun gives them issues. Just his ability to use physical leverage against them to get to his spots and his ability to kind of shoot over the top of them has caused problems. And so it's a tough matchup. And for the record, I don't think Cleveland's going to face a team with the same level of athletic and position in the Eastern Conference that Houston brings to the table. But it is worth talking about because it is an important part of their matchup with the Oklahoma City Thunder, which if they were to make it to the finals is the type of team that they might have to face, right? So before we get any further into this game, I want to say Houston's a really tough matchup for Cleveland that they probably won't have to see in the postseason. But Houston really dominated that point of attack battle over the first 3.5 quarters of this game. Their athletes were just straight beating Cleveland perimeter guys off the dribble in ISO. Both Mobley and Allen. We talk about ball contain as like on the ball, as the guy guarding the ball being the main guy who's responsible. But in ball screens, containing the ball is also on the big man, right? It doesn't matter if you are showing up at the level as the big man or sitting back in a drop. You have to keep the ball in front of you. The worst thing the thing you want to give up if you have to give something up is a little mid-range jump shot, right? Ideally, you want them taking a contested floater, contested mid-range jump shot with somebody kind of contesting from behind and you containing the ball. If you're up at the level and you let the guy drive around you, or if you're sitting in a drop and the guy drives around you, that's like the worst mistake you can make as a pick and roll big man defender, even though it's technically not your matchup. It's a 2-on-2 possession. Any ball screen is 2-on-2. There were multiple possessions where Evan Mobley and Jared Allen were getting beat by ball handlers coming off of ball screens. If you show at the level and they hit the pocket pass, there's a 4-on-3, right? But if your big man gets beat off the dribble, now it's a 5-on-3 because the big and the guard guarding the ball handler are both behind the ball now. It is very, very compromising to your defense. Evan Mobley and Jared Allen had rough defensive games all around. Like Şengün was torching them both over and over again in the post. And that's just another way you can lose the point of attack battle like we talked about earlier. So they were really dominating on that end. And then on the other end, with the exception of Darius Garland, who continues to demonstrate remarkable ability to get to his spots regardless of the types of defenders that were in front of him. And he was a bright spot in that Houston game on Saturday night. Every Cleveland player was having their drives flattened out, their ball screens smothered. The Rockets were really in ball screens keying in on Donovan Mitchell, like overplaying him and ignoring guys on kickout situations, which was really smart because Donovan Mitchell's going through a phase right now where he's kind of like forcing the issue and taking a lot of bad shots and missing some of those kickout reads. And, you know, I clipped probably a half dozen examples of Donovan Mitchell missing kickout reads and taking like really tough mid-range jump shots in the middle of the paint. But the main difference there is like, instead of Donovan Mitchell getting flying downhill off of those ball screens, he's slowly getting downhill against an elite defender and operating in that short to mid-range smothered. And that's an advantageous situation for the Houston Rockets. And so as a result, the Rockets were just getting better shots, particularly around the rim. They only took 28 threes and they shot well on them. They made 13 of them, but they made 32 twos in this game, and they got to the line almost 50 times. Cleveland was constantly hacking their athletes under the rim when their defense was compromised, just consistently getting into disadvantageous situations because they were losing that point of attack battle. So Houston ended up having one of their best half-court offense games of the season. And again, it was a lot of good Houston and a lot of bad Cleveland. The good Houston starts with Amen Thompson, who was absolutely unbelievable in this game. He had 23 points, 14 rebounds, and 10 assists to go with 2 blocks. Helped in a dozen different ways. His off-ball spacing, like cutting out of the corner on ball screens. He caught a lob cutting along the baseline from Fred VanVleet on a play where Jared Allen was guarding him and stepped over and low man help. Cutting along the baseline. This was big in crunch time. They were posting Şengün on that left block, and Amen Thompson was just kind of hawking along that baseline, trying to find an opening to either catch a pass as a cutter or to score as an offensive rebounder. And Kenny Atkinson made what I thought was a strategic mistake at the end of this game. Instead of closing with Jared Allen, he closed with Georges Niang. And I think the idea there was for shooting. And Niang did hit a big 3 on the left wing. I want to be clear. It wasn't like all bad. But they were getting absolutely fried along that back line by Amen Thompson, in large part because Niang was guarding him and just doing a really poor job of it. And then even when they did get stops, Thompson would just go get the offensive rebound over Niang. So like, I thought going with Allen was probably a better option there, but it is what it is. Amen Thompson was doing a lot of damage as a cutter along the baseline. He also got a couple of buckets in self-creation situations. He had a straight ISO in the right corner in the second half on Evan Mobley, where he drove at him and then spun off of him and shot a little floater in the lane. It reminded me of Ja Morant. And like, this is one of the things that's made Amen Thompson a really effective offensive player on the ball, even though he doesn't have much of anything in terms of a jump shot. And it's a combination of factors. His size, strength, and speed, which is the physical aggression piece, or the physical talent piece you need to get to your spots. Handles the ball well, so he can get to the middle of the floor. Then, kind of like Ja Morant, this is what reminds me of Ja Morant. Once he gets into the middle of the floor, he can just pop off of the ground and elevate over whoever's there and just shoot like these little short mini floater jump shot hook type of shots, right? And he's shooting 45% this year on shots that are in the paint but outside of the restricted area. So even though, again, he doesn't have this amazing touch out at the three-point line, he does have nice touch in and around the basket, and because of that pop off the ground ability he has, he can just kind of jump over people and make little shots. He scored a couple of buckets like that. His transition pushes were effective again in this game. He was even the key to beating Cleveland's zone. If you guys remember when Houston beat Cleveland back in Houston, the Cavs ran a ton of zone to get back into that game, and it worked in that particular game. But on Saturday, they tried it and it didn't work. You could tell Ime Udoka was on top of that. They were prepped. They wanted to play through Amen Thompson in the middle of the floor, and they scored easily against it a bunch of times. They ran over 40 possessions of zone, if I'm remembering my math right. They ran over 40 possessions of zone down in Houston, and it worked. It held them well below a point per possession. They ran only 7 possessions of zone in Cleveland before they bailed on it, in large part because they were getting something crazy like 1.4 points per possession, just killing it. And it started with Amen Thompson. They got the ball to Amen Thompson in the middle of the floor. Simple decisions from there. Catch, turn, big man steps up, drop off to Steven Adams. Steven Adams gets a bucket. They throw the ball to Steven Adams on the block. He gets a double from the wing. Easy kick-out pass to Fred VanVleet. He makes a 3. Back to Amen Thompson in the middle of the floor. The entire defense shifts over to the right side when he catches it, spins back over his shoulder and throws it to Fred VanVleet on the perimeter, forces a rotation from the left wing. Easy extra pass to Tari Eason. He's driving and he's dunking it. And it was all, like, again, Steven Adams too, but Amen Thompson in the middle of the floor in his processing speed. And honestly, this is something that has been really amazing to me about Amen Thompson in his early career development. His processing speed is off the charts for a young player. He just can very quickly pick up what's happening around him and where the opportunities are. There was a play that wasn't even in the zone. It was a like kind of a dunker spot catch that he had on the left side in the dunker spot, and he catches a lob. Ball goes way up in the air, catches it, and sees Jared Allen drop down right underneath the basket, and he just one-times it in midair right to Alperen Şengün right in front of the room, who shoots like a little floater, and he makes it. He just has excellent instincts at quickly picking up where teams are trying to ignore him and helping off of him so that he can make that next pass to break that defense down. He was a big part of them breaking down the zone. And then the offensive glass. He had 4 offensive rebounds in this game. He's just a ball hawk. Like, every time it looks like there's a 50-50 ball, it always ends up going to Amen Thompson. There was a huge play late in this game. It's 124-124. Şengün is posting up on Evan Mobley. And when he's posting up on Evan Mobley, Amen Thompson is kind of hawking along the baseline like we talked about. And even though Mobley had really struggled with Şengün for most of the night, does a good job on this possession, walls him up, gets a stop. And as a result, Mobley has to get rid of the basketball. Şengün has to get rid of the basketball. And so he just throws a pass right to Georges Niang. And Niang's right there. He's got his hands ready for the ball. Amen Thompson is behind him. Amen Thompson got the basketball. He just went through Niang and kept the ball alive. Houston kept possession. By the time Cleveland got the ball back, they were down 127-124. It literally turned what could have been a stop going the other way with Cleveland a chance to take the lead into a 3-point lead for Houston in crunch time, which was insurmountable at that point with Cleveland struggling to generate offense. It was a huge play in that game. And then on defense, Amen Thompson is just an absolute menace. Did an excellent job on Donovan Mitchell all night. He had 33 points, but it was on 11 for 27 from the field. And Mitchell generally looked out of control for most of the game. Amen Thompson is one of the most incredible examples of a legit two-way perimeter role player in the sense that he's genuinely awesome on both ends of the floor. But what makes him unique is he can't shoot the ball to save his life. And it's just super unique to have a player that's like a legit offensive weapon as a perimeter player, but that can't shoot. And it's just unique. And it's because of his remarkable ability to provide off-ball scoring as a vertical spacing threat underneath the rim in the dunker spot and as a cutter and as a rebounder. His on-ball pop as a short-range scorer, like we talked about earlier, the John Morant stuff, and his lightning-quick processing speed as a passer. And when you combine that with him just being an outstanding defensive player, like he had a play against Evan Mobley in a straight post-up defense where he just popped up off the ground and just blocked him on a straight vertical jump. He's just an incredibly impressive athlete and already such a dominant player despite being pretty raw still. Can't even imagine how good he's going to be in the long run. So shout out to Amen Thompson. Şengün was also fantastic in this game. He was just torching Evan Mobley and Jared Allen all night long in every which way. He wins the physicality battle with those guys, which I think is interesting. Like, he basically just throws them around, seems to catch them off guard, which is crazy because you think if you watch Şengün enough times, you know he's coming with that chicken wing. You know he's trying to deep seal under the basket when you're not paying attention. Like, it's all on tape there as a thing that I'm almost certain is on the scouting report. But Allen and Mobley both just really struggle with him. And again, like, it's actually kind of weird because Houston is a top 10 offense, which is something I don't think a lot of people realize. They're 9th in offensive rating on the season, but they're actually 24th in half-court offensive rating. Most of their success on offense comes in transition. That's typically been a weakness for them. As a team on the season, they have a 93 offensive rating in the half-court, but they notched a 117 offensive rating in the half-court in this win against Cleveland. So one of the most impressive half-court offense games of the year. Couple other shout outs. Dylan Brooks had some really impressive shot making in the first half. Hit like a step back jump shot, hit a turnaround fadeaway over Garland on the left block over his right shoulder. Hit a catch, I think 2 catch and shoot threes, if I remember correctly, at least 1. So that was an important part of the early part of the game. Jalen Green, he plays on an island sometimes. I think that's his biggest weakness as an offensive player right now. He kind of just feels like he's playing one-on-one a lot. But he hit some important shots in this game, and he tends to hit some important shots for this team. He hit 5 threes in this game, 2 really tough threes during that late third quarter run when they stretched the lead up to 19. I thought those were big shots. Steven Adams just doing a ton of damage on the glass, and then again as a fulcrum in the zone, he was a big part of their breaking the zone. Their bench group with him and the athletes, and there was different variations of it. There was one with like Jason Tate and Cam Whitmore. There was one with like Amen Thompson and Tari Eason, if I remember correctly. But like that group is just tough because like a lot of times like the Cavs would over box out Steven Adams, which would then leave those athletes opportunities to crash and get to the basketball. And then Fred's 3-point shooting. There were several offensive sequences for Houston where the ball ended up in Fred's hands to finish the play. And they needed him to knock down a catch and shoot 3, and he ended up making 6 of them in this game. So Houston Rockets playing some really, really impressive basketball. They are the best team in the league this year against the best teams in the league. They have 14 wins against teams that are in the top 10 in point differential, which no other team in the league has. And they've won 78% of their games against teams in the top 10 in point differential. They are 5th in offensive rating against teams in the top 10 in point differential and 3rd in defense in those games. So like Houston, say what you want. And, obviously I'm still not super high on them as like a championship contender because of my concerns with their ball handling in the postseason. But it's hard to deny that they're having an incredibly impressive regular season. On the Cleveland front, we got to start with defense. They have a 124 defensive rating in the 5 losses during this 3-5 stretch. There's slippage everywhere. Mobley and Allen were brutally bad in that Rockets game, getting beat by guards at the point of attack in ball screens, which like literally cannot happen. We talked about that earlier. If you have one job as the big in a ball screen, don't let the guard drive past you. Like make him hit something over the top, right? But they were getting beat in the post by Şengün. They were losing battles for rebounds. The two of those guys just have to be better. And then their perimeter defense. They stepped it up in crunch times. Specifically, Donovan Mitchell started flying around and really competing. But they were losing contain on the ball all night long. Their rotations weren't good. Guys not making extra efforts. Sloppiness. Like there were several possessions where they were rotating to the wrong spots. There's a bad one where like they rushed 2 guys to the left corner, ended up leaving Fred VanVleet wide open on the left wing. It's like just communicate and rotate the way you did to start the year. And then their team rebounding. They're allowing an offensive rebound on 34.5% of their opponent's misses in those 5 losses. That's really, really bad. And then on offense, they have a 115 offensive rating in the 5 losses, which is not terrible, but it's not great either. And it's down significantly from where they were earlier in the year. I think most of it comes down to Donovan Mitchell. He's really starting to regress back to what he looked like in years past, where he just tries to solve all of his problems by forcing up shots. He's missing way too many kick-out reads and ball screens that are preventing Cleveland from getting into their driving kick attack. Remember, in my thread on Twitter, there's probably at least a half dozen examples of him shooting a really tough mid-range shot in traffic when there's just an obvious kick-out read. Like there's a couple where Evan Mobley's in the corner. Evan Mobley's shooting over 50% on corner threes. You have to throw that kick-out pass. Ty Jerome is shooting over 50% on unguarded catch-and-shoot threes. You need to kick that out to Ty Jerome when he's standing there wide open. Like these are basic decisions that he has to be better at. And like he's been brutally inefficient in the mid-range in these 5 losses. In the 5 losses, 7 for 23 in the paint non-restricted area. That's 0.61 points per shot. 4 for 11 on 2s outside of the paint. 0.73 points per shot. Many of them are smothered. Many of them, there are easy kick-out reads available. So Donovan, again, the Cavs are at their best when the ball is popping around and Donovan Mitchell is picking his spots when to be aggressive. Another easy way to put it, before this 8-game stretch, Donovan Mitchell was attempting 18 shots per game and the Cavs were 31-4. In this 8-game stretch, Donovan Mitchell's taking 22.3 shots per game and the Cavs are 3-5. They need to get his volume back down. It's not helping their offense at all whatsoever, and Mitchell is starting to look like he's getting out of rhythm as a result. As a team, they've cooled off shooting the basketball a little bit, only slightly in catch and shoot situations. They started the year shooting 41% from 3 on catch and shoots. They're down to 39% in their last 8 games. The pull-up jump shooting is where it's really fallen off a cliff. They shot 39% on pull-up threes in the first chunk of the season before this 8-game stretch. That's an absurd number. In the last 8 games, they're down to 32.7% on pull-up threes, which, again, I don't think they'll be that bad. I think they're a good pull-up shooting team. I think they'll be in the 36, 37%, but some of that hot shooting that they relied on in the early part of the season is not there anymore. They're also not running as much in transition. This was something that concerned me a little bit. If you remember in the early part of the season, forcing turnovers and getting out in transition was just a huge part of Cleveland's success. They had 16 fast break points per game in the stretch before this 8-game stretch. 13th in the NBA in that span. The last 8 games, just 10.6 fast break points per game. That's 28th in the NBA. So they went from like a legit upper half transition team to one of the worst transition teams in the league in this recent stretch. Forcing turnovers. To start the year, they had over 20 points per game off of turnovers, which ranks 2nd in the NBA. In the last 8 games, only 16 points off turnovers, which ranks 20th in the NBA. In the early part of the season, they were 7th in the number of turnovers they forced per game, down to 16th in the last 8 games. So how to get back on track? Simply put, they just got to get back to doing the things that made them great in the first place. Get back to defending as a unit, both on the perimeter and on the back line. That will help you get back to forcing turnovers, which should engage your transition attack. Push in transition as much as possible to get easy shots. And then when you're in the half court, trust the pass. Get the ball and player movement back. Get Donovan Mitchell back to playing more as a tip of a spear type of ceiling-raising offensive player instead of kind of forcing the issue as much as he has been, and you will get back on track at that point. Lulls are a natural part of the 82-game regular season, and the Cavs have very deftly avoided them to this point. But they've hit their first one. This is where it's about resilience and demonstrating that that's not who you are, and how you started the year is who you really are.